I'm Miss Julie from the North Palm Beach Library. Today, I have a really good book to share with you. It's called The 7 Silly Eaters, illustrated by Marla Frazee and written by Mary Ann Hoverman. And this is a book that I used to love to read when I was a kid. So parents, a good tip is pick books that you love yourself. Don't force yourself to read a book you don't enjoy, or your kids won't either. So that's why I picked this book. And look, on the cover of my book, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 children. They must be the 7 silly eaters from the title. Let's take a look. Not so long ago, they say, a mother lived, just like today. Mrs. Peters was her name. Her little boy was named the same. Now Peter was a perfect son, in every way except for one. When Peter was just 1 year old, he did not like his milk served cold. He did not like it served hot. He liked it warm, and he would not drink it if he was not sure it was the proper temperature. Fussy baby. But Mrs. Peters did not mind. She was a mother, sweet and kind, and when his milk spilled on the floor, she patiently prepared some more. She'd take the bottle down from the shelf and chuckle softly to herself. What a silly sort of eater is my darling baby Peter. When Peter had not yet turned 2, another baby, sweet and new, was born. Dear Lucy, small and fair, with big blue eyes and curly hair. But before this child was grown, she had opinions of her own, of what she'd eat and what she'd not. She hated milk, both cold and hot, and warm was worst of all. Instead, whenever dear Lucy was fed, she bellowed for pink lemonade. But not from a can, oh no, had to be homemade. But Mrs. Peters did not mind. She squeezed each lemon to its rind, while mopping milk up from the floor and patiently preparing more. She'd take the lemons down from the shelf and giggle softly to herself. What a silly pair of eaters are Lucy dear and Peter Peters. Now Lucy grew and Peter grew till he was 3 and she was 2. And who was 1? Why, little Jack, with eyes so brown and hair so black. A happy baby, never cross, but all he'd eat was applesauce. Peeling apples by the pound, Mrs. Peters faintly frowned. She'd take the apples from the shelf and murmur weakly to herself, what a silly bunch of eaters are Lucy, Jack, and Peter Peters. Peter, Lucy, and young Jack had another brother, Mac. Mac was charming, round and plump, but if his oatmeal had a lump, Mac would dump it on the cat. Mrs. Peters hated that. But since she loved her children 4, she'd strain the oatmeal 2 times more. She'd take it down from the pantry shelf and mumble sadly to herself, what a foolish group of eaters are all my precious little Peters. Before another year was through, who came along? Why, Mary Lou. She was a darling, sweet and bright, and she had a healthy appetite. That is, as long as she was fed soft and squishy homemade bread. Poor Mrs. Peters got no rest, but still she did her very best. She'd take the flour from the shelf and mutter feebly to herself, what a fussy bunch of eaters are all my lovely little Peters. Oh, it's getting harder to feed them all. They're all so picky. A year rolled by, the children grew. They really are a splendid crew, sighed Mrs. Peters, pinning pins and diapering her brand new twins. Look, 2 babies now. Little sisters, quick and smart, impossible to tell apart, but flow like poached eggs and Fran like fried. If she mixed them up, they cried. Tired to the very bone, Mrs. Peters groaned a groan. She'd take the eggs down from the shelf and whisper weakly to herself, "What persnickety young eaters are all my 7 little Peters?" Now time went by, as time will do, and as time passed, the children grew. The problem was that as they grew, their appetites kept growing too. But not their choice of what to eat. Each child continued to repeat, they wanted what they had before. The problem was they wanted more. Look. They want more eggs, more milk, more bread, more applesauce, more lemonade, and more oatmeal. Creamy oatmeal, pots of it. Homemade bread and lots of it. Peeling apples by the peck. Mrs. Peters was a wreck. Look, she's in the kitchen all by herself, making all that food. She can't do it alone. She is so frustrated. She wiped her brow and heaved a sigh. Another year was passing by. In fact, she realized with sorrow her birthday would arrive tomorrow. Drearily, she shook her head and she went to bed. She thought the children had forgot her special day, but they had not. At crack of dawn, they all began to carry out their secret plan. Mrs. Peters would be fed a birthday breakfast in her bed. A birthday breakfast made of all the foods that had kept them in such happy moods. So they're going to cook for Mommy now. So while their weary mother slept, down the stairs the children crept, and from the cupboards and the shelves, happily they helped themselves. Cheerfully they chopped and stirred, preparing what they each preferred, but despite the pains they took, since nobody knew how to cook, to measure things or make them hot, the more they tried, the worse it got. First, Mac's oatmeal turned out lumpy, which made Max grim and grumpy. In fact, the lumps got him so cross, he dumped them in Jack's applesauce. Look, he started it. He put his oatmeal in Jack's applesauce. That bothered Jack so much, he threw it into the dough of Mary Lou. And who tossed that mishmash that made straight into Lucy's pink lemonade. And that put her in such a huff, she poured the icky sticky stuff into the double frying pan that held the eggs of Flo and Fran, who flung the hodgepodge on the spot into the milk in Peter's pot. Oh my goodness. But when they saw what they had done, they wished they'd never had begun. They hardly slept a wink that night, and still things hadn't turned out right. And though they tried their very best, it hadn't worked. They were depressed. They were sad. They'd be in trouble too, unless they found some place to hide the mess. The oven seemed the perfect spot. They all forgot it still was hot. They stuck the pot inside, and then they all went back to bed again. The clock struck 6, but on they slept. Meanwhile, their mother softly stepped down to the kitchen. She smelled a smell. What could it be? She could not tell. It smelled so good, she sniffed some more and opened up the oven door. She woke the children with her cries. They all came running down in surprise. And in the kitchen what they found was Mrs. Peters dancing round. And in the oven, no mistake, a pink and plump and perfect cake. And as their mother danced with glee, she cried, "A birthday cake for me? To think I thought you had forgot. Now tell me please, how did you make the pink and plump and perfect cake, so high and light and smooth as silk? It's smooth as silk from all my milk, said Peter. Lucy said, it's pink from my lemonade, I think. And from my apples, added Jack, my oatmeal made it soft. My bread dough too, said Mary Lou. Said Fro and Fran and Flo, as for its size, it was our eggs that made it rise. Then everybody sniffed some more and danced around the kitchen floor. They put the cake upon the dish and lit the candles, make a wish. The children cried before you blow, and Mrs. Peters did just so. And what is more, her wish came true, as birthday wishes always do. And from that day to this 'tis said, the Peters family all is fed a single meal, just one, a meal on which they all agree, made from their secret recipe. They all take turns in mixing it. They all take turns in fixing it. It's thick to beat and quick to make. It's fine to eat and it's fun to make. It's Mrs. Peters' birthday cake. Look, they all are working together and making the meal as a family. And that is the end. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next week. Goodbye.